Hello guys, welcome to another beginner JavaScript tutorials today, and we are going to be looking at functions. Great, this is exciting because this is where, quote unquote, the work begins, right? So functions, we can begin to do stuff and see them out in our console and in our browser. You know don't mind me, I'm excited today. Okay, so let's jump right into it and not waste any time. What are functions? Right, functions are how we write reusable codes and procedures. What that means is that through functions we write codes that we can then call at several points of our code base. We write tasks, so you can look at functions as tasks. So we are defining a task and then telling the code when and where to execute that task. Simple. So it's like a to-do. So you create a to-do and then you tell the code when to execute that particular to-do. So once again, we're using this reference material by Code Steel. Functions. So functions are reusable procedures. Functions allow us to write reusable modular code. We define a chunk of code that we can then execute at a later point. We use them all of the time, right? So for this course, our goal is to know how to write a valid function. Get it out? Right? Then write functions with arguments, compare function expressions and function statements, and a bunch of functions. Right? Good. So jumping right into it, how do we define a function? Two-step process really. First, we define the function, then we run it. First, we define a function, then we run it. And what does that look like? Simple. We write with the keyword function, we give it a name, we open and close a bracket, and then open and close a parenthesis. It's that simple. So let me just show you guys right here. So functions. Right, you can see my JavaScript file is empty, so I'm going to write the function. I'm going to say function say my name, right? And that's it. I have just declared this function, but this cannot do anything because what I need to do is that within this code block right here, I need to define what I want the code to do. All I have done now is just define the code. I have not asked it to do anything. I have not created it, so I need to identify what I want. So let's just say for simplicity, and I did console.log, right? Console.log Steven, right? So what I've done is that I have created a function, I have defined the function, and I've told that function that what I need you to do is to say my name, and what I need you to do there is to log my name Steven to the console, right? But this code will not do anything. I'll show you. This time around, I'm using, instead of using the terminal, I'm using the browser terminal, the browser's console. So we're going to look at things from the browser's console, right? So if we go to inspect and then go to console, everything we'll need will be seen here. Let me just pull this up so that we can see it properly. Good. Everything we need will be seen from here, right? So if everything goes right, we should see Steven right here. But here's the thing, I have not told the code to do anything. All right, so as a side note, I am using live server. Live server allows my browser to automatically reload when I save my code. So if I save my code, I will not need to go and refresh my browser all over. It to just automatically refresh and run my code again. Right, so I have declared a function, I have defined the function and told it to log my name Steven to the console, but it can't do that because I haven't called it. So when you define a function, you have to call it for it to work. So how do I call a function? All I have to do is say my name with open and close brackets, and that's it. Say my name with open and close brackets, and if we check the console, ideally all things working good, we should see Steven right here, and voila, here we go, Steven, right? And we will try that all over again, and I will write another function, right? I would write another function. I'll say function greet coders, just write that. right? And then I'll say console.log hi coders, how are you, right? Now if I save this, you will not see anything, and if you see, I commented at that particular function call there so that nothing shows on the console. Now if I go to my browser, you see Steven is gone and there's nothing on the console now. But if I do, and I'll just open this so that you guys can see it better. Good. So you just look here now. So if I do this now and say greet coders, we should see hi coders, how are you on the console. And exactly, hi coders, how are you? Great. So simple. That's what we've just done. And in a simple way, that is all that there is about, you know, declaring and calling a function. But then there is more to it. This is the rudimentary part of it. So right, like this way we can define functions and then call them. So now what a unique thing to know is this: I can call this same function over and over and over and over again without having to write or redefine the function. For example, if I just duplicate this code in 4 places, let's see, okay, let's 5, right, and save, I would see hi coders, how are you 5 times on my console, right? And that's what would happen. You see that? Hi coders, how are you? 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 Great. All right, so it's really that simple. So we can define one function and then call it at several instances in our code, right? But maybe you may not necessarily want to do this that I've just done, but you get the point, right? So now that's function. Now we'll go back to our reference material again and then see something, right? Now we define the function and we tell it what to do, and then we run it. We've got all of that on lock, right? You run it. Now arguments. Functions are able to receive arguments. Now what are arguments? Don't let the image scare you. In a simple way, arguments are how we define certain parameters for the function and then pass those parameters dynamically later on in the code. Let me just show you what I mean. Right, it is possible to, while defining so let's do this, let's rewrite this, right? So right, so let's say function, say my name. Let's say I am going to pass a name, so I say name. Watch this. Right, now what I have done here is that I have told Javascript that I am going to call this function and I'm going to pass you a name. When I pass you that name, I need you to do something with it. Now, as we all know, this code would not run. You can't do anything because I haven't told you what to do. So what if we do, if we do this console.log hi, then we concatenate it with name. What we have done here is said we have defined it here and said I am going to call this function later and I'm going to pass you a name. When I pass you that name, I want you to console.log hi plus any name that I give you. So dynamically, I do not have to. So remember here, what we did was outrightly write Steven. But in this instance, the name can then be anything. I can then say my name, and then I'll pass Julie as a string to it. Now I can also then do something interesting and pass 2 other different names at 2 different instances. I can then say James, and then I can also then say Paul. Now what would happen is that when we check our console, we should see hi Julie, hi James, hi Paul. Let's see if that works. Okay, you see that? Hi Julie, hi James, hi Paul. So what we have done with arguments is that we have written a function that dynamically accepts any name that we give to it. We do not have to write hi Steve, hi. We do not have to write a function for Steven, a function for Julie, a function for James, a function for Paul. We've written one function and we have told it that I'm going to pass you something, a name. So what it does is, okay, I'm going to wait. Let me show you something interesting here. If I call say my name without passing any parameters to it, see what happens. It should return undefined. You see, it says hi undefined. What it has said is that I expected you to pass me a name because you said you were going to pass me a name, but you didn't give me a name, so I'm just going to log what I know, and I am logging hi, and you have not defined the name for me to log. Do you understand that? So basically what that is that we have dynamically written an argument, and then when we call that function, then we can then pass it to it. Very interesting, right? So that's basically what arguments are. Now we go back to our reference material and then see inputs, right? So we treated that our functions before, we are not receiving any inputs, so they can just run themselves, but now we have not given them inputs in form of arguments. Get that? So now arguments, we've talked about arguments, right? So now let me just, okay, great team, one more. So now here's the interesting part about arguments. There is no limit to the amount of arguments that we can pass to a function, right? There's no limit. I can say let's say function, say full name, right? And then I'll say name, surname, right? And then I'll say console.log hi plus name plus surname. Now the problem is here, I need to put a comma here. Hi name, yes, I need to put a comma there, right? So you see that, right? So what I've told it is that I'm going to give you, as usual, I'm going to give you two names. One is going to be the name and the other is going to be the surname. Now what it expect, see, I'll show you one thing about it. Now if you provide there is no limit to the amount of parameters, arguments that you can give to the function, right? But for every argument that you give it, you need to give it that same amount of parameters. I'll just show you something. So if I say full name and I pass it only, if I just pass it Steven, watch what happens. Very interesting. Ideally you would believe that we should get Steven undefined. Watch, we should get Steven undefined, and that should work. So see, hi Steven undefined, because we didn't pass a surname to it, right? So we need to pass Steven and then Chris to it, and then save that, and we're supposed to get Steven Chris. See that? So if you pass any amount of function to it, any amount of argument rather, you should pass a commensurate argument with parameter to it. So these are called function parameters and these are called arguments. These are parameters. This what you pass when you call the function is called a parameter, and this is called an argument. All right, so it's that simple, right? So now you can also use this for mathematical expressions, right? So let me just take that out and say, okay, function sum. So I want to add two numbers, right? And I say x and y, right? And I then say return, and I'll say I intentionally do this, right? X plus y, right? Now here's what will happen. If I say console.log, right, two numbers, I'll give you two numbers, 2 and 4. Now I expect it to give me 6, because 2 plus 4 is 6. And what I've just done here is that I've said I want to add two numbers, is what I've just said. I've just told the code, the JavaScript, that I want to add two numbers, but let's represent them as x and y, right? Now when I present you the number, I want you to return those two a sum of those two numbers to me. So x plus y, I want you to return them to me. So if we check our console, we should have 2 plus 4 return 2. Something is wrong. Return x plus y. Oh, sorry, I console.log instead of sum 2 4, right? So we should have 6. sorry, we didn't log that to the console.log. Guys, sorry. Yeah, so console.log the sum of 2 plus 4, yeah, which will now give us 6, right? So we can go on and on and on. We can do minus. We can say, okay, minus here, and then 2 4, it should give us what? Minus 2. You know, we can go times here, and it to give us 8. We can go divide, you know, to divide it by a, and it should give us 0.5, you know, and all of that stuff. So we can use that for mathematical expressions, you know, and it'll work out just fine. So basically the idea is that we are passing arguments to it. Now I'm sure that you're asking, what is this return statement? So instead of using console.log, yeah, we can return the values of our functions, right? And let's just look at our reference material for what return does. Okay, so return, it said the return statement ends function execution and specifies the value to be returned by that function, right? So when we use return, right, the code, one thing that you need to know is this code would stop at this return. Let me show you. If I do console.log here, Steven, notice something. If you notice something, because of the because I use an extension, right, you notice that this code is not highlighted, right? And that's because the return statement specifies that this code should stop running at this line. If I hover over here, you will see unreachable code detected, right? Because why? There is a return statement here. So this code, no matter what I write here, anything I write after the return statement would not run. See that? You see it. These codes are unreachable. They are unreachable by the code because everything ends at the return statement, right? So now what it also does is that it specifies the value of what should be returned by the code. So sometimes you can do this. Instead of doing return xy, you can now say const added is equals to x plus y, x plus y. How am I writing 7? Then I can then say return the value of added. You see that? Now if we check it again, we should get sum. We should check our console. You see we have the same thing, 6, right? So in most cases this happens in programming. So you can then go back and you can write a code, you can write a lot of things. So so we can do an if statement in here and say if x greater than y, right? You can then say return, you can then say console.log why do I do this? Why am I writing y instead of 7 again? Right, so we can then say console.log x is greater, right? Then we can then say return x. Let's try this out. So what will happen here is that it will check if the value provided for x is greater than the value for y. To now log x. It will log x is greater, and then it will return the value of x. Now note one thing. This value would be x. So the first we presented two arguments here, x and y. 4 here would not be x. It will take the index. So if this is the first 2 here is the first item here, so it will replace it by x. So if we check our console now, we should see, let's check, we see we get 2. So 2 is the value of x. So we have just returned x. And if we do y, return y, right? You see 4, right? And all that stuff. So it runs a check and then says, oh, if x equals to if x equals to y, if x is greater than y, return y, you know, and all that stuff. So basically the idea behind functions here is that we are able to write to write executable codes that we can then reuse at different times. So you do not want to write the same functions over and over again, so that you don't want to repeat the same functions over and over again, so that your code doesn't become too clumsy or and filled up everywhere. Now the thing is this, yeah, there is a lot more to functions, right? We're going to be looking at functions part 2, where we're going to be looking at function expression and anonymous functions and all that. But for now, we're going to stop this one here and just see you guys later. Bye bye.